Thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. Today we take a look at the unsolved serial killer of Calgary, Alberta. Authorities in Calgary, Alberta believe that there's a serial killer at large who's been killing victims since the 1990s. Jennifer Jans, murdered July 1991 in Calgary, age 16. In the summer of 1991, Jennifer Jans was ready for a life change. The past few years had been very hard on her, but it wasn't always like that. Jennifer grew up in Calgary, in a good home. She was active in gymnastics, ballet, and was good at track and field. She was kind-hearted and trusting. When she was younger, she excelled in school, but as she got older, it became more difficult for her. The first sign of trouble was in middle school. She failed grade 7. When she finished grade 9, she dropped out and moved around with various friends. Most of their time was spent on the streets. Still, Jennifer called home all the time. Her mother would tell her she was welcome home whenever she wanted. When she was 15, Jennifer spent 2 months at a Christian Bible camp in Texas. Staying there was a last-ditch effort by her parents. It seemed to help. When she returned in early 1991, she became active in youth groups and found a job. She even enrolled at the James Fowler High School for a few weeks in February. Jennifer's family continued to look for ways to bring her home. Her 16th birthday passed. She was still drawn to life on the street, although she continued to wander. By summer, it seemed like she was finally ready to come home. In July of 1991, Jennifer became sick with a kidney infection and was treated at the Rockview Hospital. Every evening, her family came to see her. On July 12, 1991, Jennifer called her mother. She said she was leaving the hospital and wanted to come for supper next week. She was last seen leaving the emergency room. 1 month later, on August 13th, Jennifer's badly beaten body was discovered in a shallow grave at an intersection site along the Trans-Canada Highway near Valley Ridge Drive, northwest of Calgary. An autopsy determined she died from a heavy blow to the chest. Like so many other young women in Calgary, Jennifer never had the chance to come home. But her murder was only the start. The second known victim, Rebecca Lynn Boutelier. Rebecca Lynn was born in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. When she was 18 months old, her father passed away in a car accident. Her mother moved them out to Calgary after that. Every night, Rebecca's mother would tuck her in and they would talk. Her childhood was rocky, according to her mother, but they were always close. Eventually, she said she began to realize Rebecca had a secret life. In December of 1991, Rebecca became a mother. On February 12th, 1993, when Rebecca was 20 and her son was 15 months old, she disappeared. She was last seen in the area of 3rd Avenue and 4th Street Southwest in downtown Calgary, wearing a waist-high length black suede jacket with a front zipper and leather waist which fastened with a brass buckle. A woman who was working on the streets with Rebecca said she might have got into a blue car. On March 11th, 1993, Rebecca's partially clad remains were discovered in a heavily traveled area east of McKnight Boulevard and 68th Street Northeast, meters from a pile of roof shingles. She had been stabbed to death. Rebecca's jacket, purse, and boots have never been found. Investigators believe they were kept by her killer. At the start, there were hopeful leads. Investigators collected 3 huge plastic containers of canola seeds from the scene and sent them to the Federal Crime Lab in Edmonton for analysis. Near Rebecca's body, a pile of women's clothing was also discovered. Investigators eventually were able to trace the clothing to a sex worker in the city who was staying in a motel. The woman was reluctant to talk, but after a while she told the police about the night she had a bad date who attacked her inside a vehicle. The woman couldn't offer any further details and refused to press charges. Like the other women who were murdered after Jennifer Jans, Rebecca had been working in the sex trade for some time. It took a decade for the murders of Rebecca and Jennifer to be linked. Police became suspicious there was a serial killer operating out of Calgary. They began connecting various murder victims. Joanne Shaver, Jennifer Joyce, Jennifer Jans, Shauna Vanderbash, Keely Pincott, Tracy Maunder, Rebecca Boutelier, all murdered between 1990 and 1993. In August 1991, 17-year-old Jennifer Joyce vanished from her group home. In 1986, when she was 12 years old, Jennifer's mother passed away in a tragic car accident, and she became a ward of the province of Alberta. She was well liked in school. Her teachers told the local papers that she had tremendous potential. Jennifer had recently moved to an independent living facility, but like Jennifer Jans, she was drawn to life on the streets. On October 6, 1991, her body was found in a shallow grave near 77th Street and 13th Street Northwest, approximately 2 kilometers south of where Jennifer Jans was found. Her cause of death has never been released. Joanne Shaver, murdered January 1990. Her body was found on Shepherd Road. She'd been sexually assaulted and strangled. According to early reports in the Calgary Herald, at age 12, Shaver began to run away and work in the sex trade. At the time of her murder, she was a ward of the province of Alberta and was living in a group home. Police said Shaver's killer appeared to have a history of predatory sexual aggression. James Arthur Link, a convicted sex offender, was charged with first-degree murder in the case, but was later acquitted. Shauna Vanderbosch, murdered June 1991. On June 19th, Shauna was socializing with co-workers at a Calgary restaurant. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Shauna and 2 of her girlfriends attended the Tasmanian Ballroom on 12th Avenue and 1st Street in Calgary to view a fashion show benefit for the Sheriff King home. Shauna left the fashion show around 1:30 a.m. on June 20th, 1991. An acquaintance gave her a ride to the corner of Southland Drive and McLeod Trail at approximately 3:30 a.m. On June 20th, at approximately 8:30 a.m., Shauna's nude body was discovered beside a rural road southwest of Calgary, about 4.5 kilometers from the Pritis turnoff, north of Highway 22X. Shauna worked as an escort and as a hairdresser for Moda Design. Keely Pincott and Tracy Maunder in 1992. Keely was a 29-year-old mother and cocktail waitress who adored her kids. She was looking forward to changing careers. She loved makeup and modeling. In May of 1991, Keely spoke to her mother for the last time. 6 months later, in November of 1991, her mother reported her missing. On March 10th, 1992, Keely's skeletal remains were found in a wooded area 2 kilometers northeast of Cochrane, Alberta, off Highway 1A. She was identified through dental records and x-rays. Her cause of death was never published. Tracy Maunder had her first son at 14 years old. At 26 years old, she was diagnosed with cancer and had only been working on the streets for 6 months. Tracy was trying to raise enough money to buy a plane ticket for her son, so he could stay with his grandmother while Tracy received treatments. Tracy Maunder disappeared on October 28, 1992. 3 days later, she was found beaten and stabbed to death in a field off Garden Road southeast, like Rebecca Boutelier. Her body was found in a grassy field east of the city. The investigation happened in 1993. In a span of 19 months, 5 women were murdered. 4 of them had confirmed links to the sex trade. According to a May 1999 Calgary Sun article, after the murder of Rebecca Boutelier, 6 years passed without a murder of a sex worker in Calgary. In 1993, the Calgary Task Force traveled to Edmonton for a serial killer psychological profile meeting with top FBI profilers. They examined possible links between 15 murders, including those of Jennifer Jans, Jennifer Joyce, and Keely Pincott. It's unclear if they examined the murders of Rebecca Boutelier and Tracy Maunder. The details of their findings were not released. Throughout the 90s, across Western Canada, violent attacks against women from all walks of life continued. Not all victims were sex workers. The murder of Shauna Vanderbosch in June of 1991, before Jennifer Jans, was just one of those cases. The pattern. Between 1991 and 1995, At least 56 sex trade workers were killed while working in the streets in Canada. 8 of these women were from Alberta. By 2000, the pattern was impossible to ignore. In 2003, after examining 82 similar unsolved cases in Western Canada, the RCMP developed a project to investigate the serial murders and disappearances of vulnerable persons, focusing on the cases in Edmonton and the Calgary area. A grossly disproportionate number of these cases involved Indigenous women. Far too many of these murders, including the cases in Calgary, remain unsolved. One possible suspect investigated in the Calgary murders was a Lethbridge pimp named Barry Thomas Niedermeyer. In 1990, Niedermeyer was convicted of trafficking a 14-year-old girl in BC, who he had met in Calgary. When investigators rescued the girl and finally interviewed her, she was so terrified she requested the stuffed animal she'd kept for comfort during her captivity. Investigators returned to the hotel room where she'd been kept to get it for her. For this heinous crime, Niedermeyer served out just 14 months in jail in 2000. He was charged with 14 offenses against 7 Vancouver sex trade workers, but no evidence was found to link him to the murders in Calgary. According to the 2011 report by the Sister Watch Project of the Vancouver Police Department and the Women's Memorial March Committee on Missing and Murdered Aboriginal Women in Canada, the murder risk for sex trade workers is approximately 60 to 120 times that of the general female population. Some research suggests that sex workers are the most likely victims of a serial killer. The report also states, most highly addicted and desperate sex trade workers are more likely than other sex trade workers to be victims of a serial killer. Jennifer Jans and Rebecca Boutelier never knew each other, but their brief lives collided on the streets of Calgary. They led risky lifestyles, but nothing justifies brutal murder, especially when it's to somebody just experiencing hard times. Suspects have been questioned and various leads pursued, yet there has been no justice for these women. 30 years have passed since the murders began. Investigators believe the same individual is responsible for the murder of Jennifer Jans and Rebecca Boutelier, as well as the other women in Calgary, who were just doing their best to survive. If you are a victim or survivor of forced prostitution or forced labor, or believe someone else might be, call the hotline at 1-833-900-1010. If you have any information about these cases, you can call Crime Stoppers or submit a tip online. If you have any information about these women, you can remain anonymous as you submit your tip, and you won't have to testify in court. Thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe, as we'll be uploading more regularly.